Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today. If you've ever found yourself wondering what is actually going on inside the heads of highly intelligent people, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Today, we're diving deep into the source material to decode how highly intelligent brains actually operate. We're going to do this by exploring 10 really subtle everyday habits. I was literally fascinated to learn what psychology research actually tells us about the true nature of a high IQ, because as you'll see, it is completely separate from the stereotypes we've come to expect. Okay, let's dive into this, because there is a massive gap between what we think intelligence looks like and what it actually looks like in the real world. When we picture a genius, thanks to Hollywood and pop culture, we almost always imagine someone who's, incredibly loud about their brilliance. We picture them furiously solving equations out loud, writing backward on a glass chalkboard, because for some reason, geniuses in movies absolutely love writing on windows. But the psychology research, it reveals a totally different story. The actual reality is much, much quieter. Highly intelligent people usually display these really subtle everyday habits that don't scream genius at first glance. Instead, their behaviors are deeply, deeply focused on internal processing. To make sense of all this, we're going to organize these behaviors into a few cohesive psychological systems. Our agenda today covers 1. The myth of genius, 2. The internal processing engine, 3. Navigating social dynamics, 4. The flexible mind, and finally, 5. Redefining true intelligence. Let's jump right in. Starting with Section 1, the myth of genius, redefining what brilliance looks like. So, the crucial point is this. Cognitive psychologists constantly emphasize that true intelligence is not just a giant encyclopedia of memorized facts. It's not about winning trivia night. It is fundamentally about how your brain processes the world around you. It's an active, dynamic system. Like, how do you take in information? How do you connect the dots? That right there is the foundational thesis of our entire explainer today. Intelligence is an ongoing process of understanding, not just some static state of knowing things. That brings us to Section 2, the internal processing engine, how a high IQ brain works in isolation. When I first read through this research, I was really surprised by this first cluster of habits, because they all center around the internal workings of an active mind. Highly intelligent people often display these specific traits. They spend a ton of time alone, they literally talk to themselves out loud, they seem to overthink the smallest things, and they are notorious for late-night thinking. Now, on the surface, I know some of these might seem a bit quirky, or maybe even like signs of indecision, right? But psychology tells us they all share a very specific common cognitive root. It turns out that root leads us straight to the biology of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex. This is the area of your brain that handles planning, reflection, and really complex deep thinking. An incredibly active prefrontal cortex is basically a high-performance engine. And what does a massive engine need to function at its best? It needs space. It craves quiet. Solitude isn't about avoiding people for them. It's about providing the brain with the necessary environment to process massive amounts of complex information without getting interrupted. In fact, this need for quiet processing is backed up by some incredibly fascinating data. Get this, researchers from the London School of Economics found that highly intelligent individuals actually tend to feel less satisfied with frequent social interaction compared to everyone else. No way, right? But this doesn't mean they dislike humanity or lack social skills, not at all. It simply means that because their brains are constantly running simulations and processing ideas, being social all the time can just feel overwhelming. Their brains are quite literally demanding quiet thinking time just to keep up with their own internal processing speed. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the research reframes a habit we joke about all the time, talking to yourself. Psychologists actually have a fancy term for this, self-directed speech. When you see someone quietly narrating their own actions or, arguing a point out loud with themselves, they aren't losing their grip on reality. Studies show that this is actually an incredibly effective way to improve focus and maintain cognitive control. It's like an external hard drive for the brain. It helps organize sprawling thoughts and massively strengthens working memory. It's just a visible sign of a highly active cognitive system doing the heavy lifting. And what about the night owls out there? Many high IQ individuals report being far more mentally active late at night. Mind racing, can't shut it off. Well, researchers actually connect this to evolutionary psychology. The theory goes that individuals with higher cognitive flexibility are simply much better at adapting to non-traditional patterns, like staying awake long after the sun goes down. Their brains are wired to explore beyond conventional boundaries. And yeah, that includes typical sleep schedules. Have you ever laid in bed replaying a simple conversation over and over? Or felt guilty for agonizing over a tiny, relatively small decision? Well, don't be too hard on yourself. An analytical brain rarely turns off. The exact same cognitive processes used to solve massive, complex problems are suddenly being applied to your everyday interactions. What looks like simple indecision to an outside observer is actually the brain rapidly exploring multiple mental models and possibilities all at once. Your brain is just stubbornly refusing to leave any stone unturned. Okay, moving on to section 3, navigating social dynamics, processing the external world. So we've seen how the high IQ brain operates when it's totally isolated. But what happens when it actually interacts with the rest of the world? We see two very distinct social behaviors pop up: observing way more than they speak and possessing a particularly strong sense of humor. Both of these are really just external applications of that internal pattern recognition software we just talked about. In conversations, highly intelligent people often prefer to just watch the social dynamics unfold first. They're the quiet observers in the room. But make no mistake, this isn't necessarily shyness or not having anything to say. It is an active, rapid process of data gathering. They are reading the room, analyzing subtle emotional cues, and using that strong pattern recognition to really map out the social landscape before they thoughtfully choose to jump in. And this brilliantly illustrates why humor is such a strong indicator of intelligence. To actually understand or create a great joke, your brain has to perform this highly complex cognitive routine in literally milliseconds. Step 1, recognize a pattern or social norm. Step 2, instantly break or subvert those expectations. Step 3, connect seemingly unrelated ideas to land the punchline, which, by the way, is why explaining a joke mathematically is the absolute fastest way to ruin it. But seriously, studies published in intelligence research journals show a highly measurable correlation between high IQ and this kind of advanced humor processing. Next up is section 4, the flexible mind, adapting to new information. When we look at how a high IQ brain handles knowledge, a few really distinct traits pop out of the data. There's this relentless, constant curiosity about everything, from the super mundane to the incredibly profound. We also see a surprising comfort with simply saying, I don't know. There's a willingness to change their minds when new evidence pops up, and a constant underlying search for meaning. Think of it like a mental engine that is perpetually hungry for answers. Being perfectly fine with saying I don't know actually ties directly into a famous psychological concept called the Dunning-Kruger effect. You've probably heard of this. It's the tendency for people with less knowledge on a subject to vastly overestimate their expertise. Highly intelligent people tend to do the exact opposite. Because their brains are so exceptionally aware of just how much complexity exists out there in the universe, they can clearly see the limits of their own knowledge. They know exactly what they don't know. And when they do encounter new information that completely contradicts what they thought they knew, they adapt. This is known as cognitive flexibility. Instead of treating their beliefs as these rigid, unchangeable identities, highly intelligent people treat them as flexible mental models. Actually, it's a lot like a software update. When new verified evidence appears, the brain simply updates the model. Changing your mind isn't a sign of weakness. For sure, the psychology data views it as a major key marker of advanced problem solving. Because of this heightened awareness of how incredibly complex the world truly is, from huge societal structures down to our own interpersonal relationships, high intelligence often carries with it a constant search for meaning. It leads to much deeper, much quieter reflections on purpose, on identity, and on why we humans behave the way we do. It's that quiet little voice in the back of the mind that just never stops asking, why? Which brings us to a really important reflection for all of us. How often do we look at these exact behaviors and just get them completely backward? Think about a colleague who prefers to eat lunch alone. Do we just label them antisocial? What about a friend who constantly asks a million questions? Do we think they're just being skeptical or difficult? Or someone who changes their mind? Do we judge them as flaky? Often, we are entirely misjudging what are actually signs of incredibly deep, rigorous thinking patterns. Let's move to and see how this builds into our final segment. Section 5. Redefining true intelligence, the core takeaway. For me, the most fascinating takeaway from all of this research is this beautiful summary right here. Intelligence is really about curiosity. It is a brain that simply refuses to stop exploring patterns, questioning its own assumptions, and trying to decipher the strange, completely fascinating puzzle of human nature. It's an active, relentless journey of understanding, not a static destination where you just suddenly know everything. So, as we wrap up our analysis today, I want to leave you with a thought. look back at the internal engines, the social observations, and the flexible mindsets we just talked about. Which of these subtle processing habits do you recognize in your own everyday thinking? The answers might just tell you something absolutely incredible about your own cognitive engine. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning everything.